Hello, everybody. Today's lecture is about race and ethnic inequality. But before we get started, I'd like your opinion on something. Let's say, hypothetically, you know a couple where the husband has been physically abusive of the wife. He's been emotionally abusive, verbally abusive. You've seen him push her, you've seen him beat her, and there are many times you jump in and you stop him from hitting her. And you would encourage her to leave him, but she would say she had no place to go. She depended on him financially, and most of all, she loved him. So you got tired of being around him with all this violence going on, so you decided to separate yourself from this, couple of friends. And then one day, some years pass, and you're walking through the mall, and lo and behold, who do you see? The couple. As a matter of fact, they're holding hands, they're hugging, they're stopping periodically to kiss each other. They look like newlyweds in love, and you can't believe what you're seeing. So you rush up to them, they're happy to see you, they give you a big hug, and you ask them, how are things between you two? I mean, the last time I saw you, it was really ugly. I mean, you were smacking her and pushing her and all of this. And he says, well, we're doing really good. I mean, I'm sorry you saw me do that, and I admit I was a real jackass, but, I went to counseling, I went to therapy, right, honey? And I'd say we're perfect. We're close to perfect. We're doing date nights, we're on a date night right now. So I'd say things are pretty close to perfect, wouldn't you, honey? And he looks at her and smiles, and she looks up and says, yeah, we're good. And then he says, excuse me, I'll be right back. I need to go and check this store for something. And he walks away, which is growth because he never would leave you alone with her before. He would be afraid of what she'd say. So you pull her aside and you say, hey, listen, I remember how bad things were. How are things really? And she kind of looks over her shoulder. And then she says, okay, first of all, I'll give him credit. Things were pretty bad, and he was really abusive. He put me in the hospital a couple of times, but you know what? We went to counseling, and he's right. We're doing a lot better. Now, are we perfect? Oh, no. I mean, does he still curse at me every now and again? He hasn't hit me in a couple of years. He punched the wall a few times, but he hasn't hit me. So we're better than we used to be, but are we perfect? No. We still got some work to do. Now, let me ask you, which of the two would you believe? Would you believe the husband, or would you believe the wife? And if we were in class, I would ask this question. I would give you this hypothetical and ask you, who would you believe? And almost every time, 99.9% of the class will say, I believe the wife. And I believe the wife too. And then I'd ask them, why do you believe the wife? And eventually someone will say what I want to hear. They'll say, I believe her because she's the victim. Bingo. I believe her because she's the victim. When the victim says things are better, then things are better. But I don't expect the perpetrator, the abuser, to say things are perfect. So he's going to cover it up. He's going to minimize what he's done. He's going to leave it all in the past and let's move forward and forget about the past. We're doing good now. Let's just keep it here. But I'm going to believe her because when she says the abuse stops or it stopped, then it stopped. Now, I know we talked about, gender stratification last week. And in our last lecture, we talked about violence against women. So you're saying to yourself, no doubt, well, why are we talking about this? I thought we were going to be talking about race. Well, that's the analogy I use for race. You see, every so often, there's a survey across this country where they ask citizens in the United States how we've progressed when it comes to racial relations. And you get two stories most of the time. You have people of color, Black people in particular, saying, well, I still experience discrimination. We get shot by police officers when we're unarmed. I didn't think I got a job because of my race. I didn't get an apartment because of my race. This stuff still happens. It's not Mississippi 1955, but we still got some work to do. And then you'll hear some whites, not all whites, say, well, they need to get over it. That's the past. Things aren't that bad. They're just playing the race card. They just got that victim, they've got that victim mentality. I mean, there are a few things. There are a few bad apples. There are a few assholes out there, but for the most part, I think we've done really well. We had a black president, for God's sake. What more do these people want? So, if we would believe the victim of abuse, why don't we believe the victims of racism? You see, it's not until African Americans and other minority groups say things are better that we can rest assured that things are better, because they are the victims of racism. White people are not. Now, we're going to talk about what racism is. And racism involves institutional power, of which people of color, blacks in particular, have none of. So until you have the power to use the institutions of a society to hold people back, to oppress them, or even take their lives, you are not the victim of racism. So until the victim of racism says things are better, then we have to take the victim's word for it, don't we? I mean, if someone was to come to me and say, what is it like to be a man in America? I would be very offended, because I'm not a man. I'm a woman. I don't know how men experience life. I know how I experience it, but I can't speak for men. So I really don't believe that whites should be asked about the progress of race relations when they don't really know what racism is, because they haven't experienced it like people of color have. So that's setting the tone for our lecture today. And I realize this video is a bit longer than most will be, but I'd like to introduce us into this topic because it's a very difficult one to have in our country. We have a problem with racism in this nation, and we've yet to fully acknowledge it. And until we do, we can't possibly expect things to get better. So we'll begin the lecture